A bell rings across a quiet courtyard, and violence seems less like an attack than a question. Enter the Dragon begins with discipline and observation, then expands into an international spy adventure built around one extraordinary screen presence. Released in 1973, it became a financial bridge between Hollywood and Hong Kong, carrying martial arts cinema into a global commercial marketplace. The story follows Lee, a highly skilled martial artist recruited by British intelligence to investigate Han, a former Shaolin student who rules a private island. Han presents his operation as an elite tournament, but the competition hides drug production, human trafficking and murder. Lee also carries a personal motive because Han's men were connected to his sister's death. Produced for approximately $850,000, the project was modest by Hollywood standards but unusually ambitious for an international action production. Warner Brothers, Concord Productions and their partners were investing in cross-cultural collaboration, unfamiliar choreography and a leading man whom American studios had not yet accepted as a conventional star. The gamble succeeded because Bruce Lee was not presented merely as a fighter. His speed, stillness, humor, and philosophy formed the product's central value. The film sold action, but its deeper innovation was allowing an Asian hero to command the frame without apology or dependence on a white rescuer. The first half works like an efficient business launch. It introduces the product, defines the mission and moves quickly toward the island where every major conflict can interact. Lee receives the assignment after demonstrating both physical skill and mental control. His training scene establishes that victory depends on awareness, timing, and freedom from rigid method. The narrative introduces Roper and Williams, two American martial artists traveling to Han's tournament for different reasons. Roper is escaping gambling debts and sees the island as a possible financial opportunity. Williams is escaping racist police violence and carries a sharper distrust of authority. Their parallel journeys create three psychological entry points into the same dangerous system. Han welcomes the competitors with luxury, ceremony, and managed hospitality. Like a founder presenting an attractive company to investors, he controls the visible experience while hiding the real operation. The banquet, uniforms, and disciplined guards communicate power before the plot proves how that power is maintained. During the first night, Lee investigates restricted areas. This is the prototype stage of the mission. He tests routes, observes security and gathers information without revealing his full capability. The pacing protects audience investment by alternating philosophy, character, and action. Instead of exhausting spectacle early, each fight becomes evidence that the central promise is growing. In the second half, the tournament stops being sport and becomes a machine for exposing character. Lee defeats O'Hara, the man linked to his sister's death, but the emotional victory remains incomplete. O'Hara attacks with broken bottles, forcing Lee to respond. The moment separates skill controlled by principle from violence controlled by humiliation. Williams confronts Han after refusing false accusations. His confidence is powerful, but Han uses hidden advantages and overwhelming force to kill him. Roper is shown the body and offered a place inside Han's organization. The offer is behavioral economics in its darkest form, accept safety and future profit by ignoring the human cost. Lee discovers the underground laboratory and frees the prisoners. At the same time, Roper rejects Han's partnership, choosing loyalty over self-preservation. Their separate decisions converge in a courtyard battle where captives, guards, and tournament fighters collide. Private moral choices become public action. The final confrontation moves into the Hall of Mirrors. Han uses reflections to multiply uncertainty, but Lee learns to destroy the images rather than chase them. He wins by removing false information from the environment. When authorities arrive, the criminal system has already collapsed from within. The ending delivers emotional product-market fit. Lee completes the mission, honors his sister, frees the captives and defeats a villain whose greatest weapon was control over what others were allowed to see. Lee's psychology is built around controlled intensity. He carries grief, but refuses to let grief choose every action. This is emotional regulation rather than emotional absence. He can become explosive because he spends most of the story conserving energy, reading behavior, and deciding when commitment will create the greatest result. Han represents status obsession. His island, museum, uniforms, and artificial hand belong to a man trying to replace moral authority with possession. He recruits talented people because he wants their ability to confirm his importance. Every relationship must prove that he stands above someone else. Roper is initially guided by short-term incentives. Debt makes him vulnerable to Han's wealth, yet friendship creates a competing value that money cannot price. Williams operates from dignity. Having experienced systems that treat him unfairly, He recognizes coercion quickly and refuses obedience for safety. Lee's essential leadership quality is adaptability. He studies the person, distance, and environment, then selects what is useful. His identity is not attached to displaying a favorite method. The mirror sequence completes the behavioral lesson. Han produces many false versions of himself. Lee wins control by refusing to react to every image. Under information overload, the strongest mind is not the one that follows every signal, but the one that identifies which signals are real. The financial story is remarkable because the production cost approximately $850,000, while widely reported estimates place its initial worldwide theatrical earnings near $90 million. Lifetime totals vary because the film was repeatedly re-released across many territories, but the cost-to-revenue relationship was extraordinary. Box office gross is not studio profit. Cinemas retain a share of ticket sales, distributors recover marketing and delivery expenses, and production partners divide remaining revenue according to contracts. A responsible ROI analysis treats the headline gross as evidence of consumer demand, not as money deposited directly into one account. Warner Brothers increased its exposure after seeing the nearly completed film. Additional spending on music, promotion, and market positioning helped transform an inexpensive production into a studio event. The marketing budget functioned as growth capital placed behind a product whose footage demonstrated unusual potential. Value continued through theatrical reissues, television licensing, home video, soundtrack sales, and decades of catalog exploitation. The low original cost allowed later revenue streams to generate strong contribution margins after distribution and restoration expenses. From an EBITDA perspective, the greatest asset was Bruce Lee's screen identity and the repeatable genre language built around him. Martial arts traveled across language barriers because physical storytelling requires less translation than dialogue-heavy drama. The film also revealed underserved audience economics. Viewers who rarely saw Asian heroes or black martial artists treated with power responded to a product that recognized them. Representation was culturally important and commercially intelligent because it exposed demand that studio assumptions had failed to measure. The filmmaking technology is grounded in analog limitation. Cinematographer Gil Hubbs photographed the production in anamorphic widescreen, using Arriflex cameras and a small set of Panavision lenses found in Hong Kong. Limited equipment forced the crew to solve problems through placement, rehearsal, and disciplined shot design rather than endless coverage. Anamorphic photography gave the tournament grounds, harbor, and island architecture broad scale. It also allowed several fighters to remain visible inside one composition. This matters because the audience must see distance, balance, and body position. Excessive cutting would hide the performance being sold. The production used practical stunts and physical contact. Hong Kong stunt teams worked without many protective technologies common in larger American productions, including advanced breakaway materials and modern fall systems. The result looks immediate, but that authenticity carried serious human risk. Dialogue was looped during post-production, a common Hong Kong workflow. Re-recording helped overcome noisy locations and language challenges, although it sometimes creates a slight separation between voice and image. The whole of mirrors was a low-technology effect with high conceptual value. Real reflections created lighting and camera problems. The sequence reportedly added about $8,000 to the budget and was filmed near the end of production. Innovation here means designing around scarcity. 2 cameras, limited lenses, practical sets, and precisely staged bodies created images that remain readable decades later. Technology served performance rather than replacing it. Production management had to coordinate American studio expectations with Hong Kong working methods. Filming ran from late January to late April 1973, and the schedule faced language differences, creative disagreements, injuries, and pressure to build an international action film on a restricted budget. Bruce Lee was not only the leading actor. He shaped fight choreography, challenged script choices, and fought to keep his character at the story's center. This created tension, but it protected the project's value proposition. Reducing his authority would have weakened the element that distinguished the film from ordinary espionage entertainment. Tournament scenes used hundreds of background performers. Managing them required costume control, movement planning, meals, transport, and security. Reports that some extras came from rival groups show why production logistics are also behavioral logistics. A large set is a temporary society with competing personalities and incentives. Injuries disrupted the schedule. Lee cut his hand during a broken bottle sequence and required stitches. He was also reportedly bitten by a cobra. Every shutdown creates financial pressure because labor, locations, and equipment remain committed while usable footage stops accumulating. The crew worked with primitive props and limited resources. Han's museum and skeletal hand show how production design can create mythology without expensive materials. Good management identifies which details audiences will remember and allocates scarce capital toward them. The finished film feels controlled because disorder was absorbed behind the camera. Management converted conflict, limited equipment, and physical danger into a coherent 98-minute product. Historically, the film is a 1970s spy fantasy shaped by James Bond, Hong Kong action cinema, and growing Western interest in martial arts. A private island tournament concealing an international criminal laboratory is not documentary realism. It is a genre structure designed to gather heroes, villains, and fighting styles in one controlled location. The Shaolin connection gives Han and Lee a shared moral origin, but the story simplifies complex religious and martial traditions into an opposition between disciplined service and corrupted power. Its cultural value lies less in factual detail than in presenting martial practice as philosophy, ethics, and self-knowledge. The combat is more credible than many later action films because the camera often preserves full-body movement. Lee's economy of motion, rapid interception, balance, and distance control reveal genuine training. Yet cinematic fights require cooperation. Opponents attack in readable rhythms, impacts are amplified, and one fighter survives numbers that would overwhelm a real person. Human reaction time and force production place limits on any combatant. Lee's speed was exceptional, but the image is strengthened by choreography, camera angle, sound, and editing. Scientific accuracy therefore exists in layers. Authentic athletic ability is presented through engineered emphasis. The underground drug operation, artificial hand, and endless guards belong to Pulp Fiction. But the social structure is recognizable. Criminal organizations use luxury, fear, and dependency to secure obedience. The film is most truthful when it shows that technique without ethics becomes exploitation. Knowledge can liberate or dominate depending on the purpose of the person using it. The cinematography treats Bruce Lee's body as both character and visual technology. His posture communicates calm, measurement, or imminent force before he speaks. Hubs often allows movement to begin inside a stable composition, so the audience experiences acceleration rather than receiving only fragments of impact. Wide frames create combat transparency. In the opening match, tournament fights, and courtyard rebellion, viewers understand where bodies are positioned and how one action causes the next. This clarity produces visual trust. We believe the skill because the camera gives the performance time and space to prove itself. Close-ups provide psychological punctuation. Han's smile, Roper's calculating eyes, and Lee's sudden changes of expression turn decision-making into visible action. The scratches across Lee's torso gradually convert his body into a record of the battle. Color separates environments. White tournament clothing contrasts against stone courtyards and green landscapes. Han's interiors use gold, red, and shadow to communicate ceremony, wealth, and threat. The underground areas become colder and mechanical, exposing the system beneath the island's elegant surface. The whole of mirrors is the visual engineering climax. Reflections destroy ordinary geography while the camera, lights, and crew must remain concealed. The production solves the challenge through composition, movement, and selective framing. When Lee breaks the mirrors, cinematography and story become one idea. The image becomes clearer because the character has simplified the problem. Visual design becomes the physical expression of understanding. Sound design transforms controlled choreography into perceived impact. A punch on set may produce little useful noise, so post-production adds sharper strikes, body falls, cloth movement, and vocal reactions. These elements create weight without requiring performers to injure one another for every shot. Bruce Lee's vocal expressions are essential. His cries change rhythm, pitch, and duration, functioning as breath control, intimidation, and emotional release. They became an audio signature audiences could recognize without seeing his face. Lalo Schifrin's score combines orchestral suspense, jazz energy, and musical gestures associated with East Asian instrumentation. The main theme presents the story as international rather than confined to one national style. Its rhythm promises movement while darker textures support espionage and danger. Silence creates contrast. Before Lee enters a restricted space or prepares to strike, the soundtrack often reduces information. Footsteps, breathing, and environmental noise become more noticeable. The following impact feels stronger because the air has been waiting. Post-synchronized dialogue solved practical production problems but required performance reconstruction. Actors recreated timing and emotion after filming. Editors balanced voice, music and effects so philosophical dialogue remained clear without weakening physical energy. The mix gives each fighting identity a sound. Lee is fast and precise, Han's guards arrive as massed force, and underground machinery creates an industrial presence. The audience hears discipline, corruption and rebellion occupying different acoustic spaces. Warner Brothers understood that the main marketing challenge was classification. American audiences were already seeing cheaply distributed kung fu imports, and the studio did not want this production mistaken for another dubbed program picture. It held marketing seminars and positioned the release as a major Warner Brothers feature with international production values. This was a branding decision. The campaign sold Bruce Lee as a new global star while using familiar spy film elements to reduce consumer uncertainty. The island fortress, glamorous danger, criminal mastermind, and tournament offered recognizable signals around an unfamiliar leading man. Martial arts is highly trailer-friendly because seconds of movement can demonstrate speed and control without explaining the plot. The product communicated value visually. The campaign became emotionally complicated when Lee died on July 20, 1973, before the American release. Public grief increased attention, but the studio was introducing a superstar who could not participate in publicity or build a conventional sequel pipeline. Audience analytics lacked today's dashboards. Studios measured theater grosses, regional response, press coverage, and demographic patterns. Strong performance among underserved audiences proved that mainstream demand was broader than executives had assumed. Re-releases extended the campaign for years. Television and home video introduced the film to younger viewers. Marketing no longer belonged to one release date. Lee's image became a self-renewing cultural signal carried by posters, music, martial arts schools, games, and popular language. Contemporary critics often recognized the film's speed, color, and choreographic clarity even when they treated the story as simple genre entertainment. Its reputation grew because audiences understood something older critical language struggled to describe. Fight choreography could carry character, rhythm, and meaning in the way dance had done for earlier cinema. The film did not become an Academy Award success, yet institutional recognition arrived through longevity. The Academy later celebrated its anniversary, and the Library of Congress selected it for the National Film Registry in 2004 as a work of cultural, historical, or aesthetic significance. Its legacy is visible across action cinema. The tournament structure influenced films and video games. The mirror confrontation became one of the medium's most recognizable visual ideas. The combination of philosophy, spy plotting and martial arts created a template that could be copied, parodied and transformed. Lee's influence also changed casting economics. He demonstrated that an Asian actor could lead an international production through charisma rather than stereotype. Jim Kelly's Williams gave black audiences a stylish martial artist whose confidence was not reduced to comic relief. Weaknesses remain visible. Women are often treated as victims or decoration, supporting characters receive limited development, and the criminal plot is broad. Legacy should not hide these limitations. Yet lasting value comes from what competitors cannot reproduce. Many performers learn choreography, but few combine physical speed, philosophical authority, screen stillness, and emotional electricity. The production created a franchise-scale cultural asset around a performer whose career ended before the market could fully develop it. The film endures because art, technology, and capital briefly moved in the same direction. The art was Bruce Lee's belief that martial movement could express thought. The technology was a limited collection of cameras, lenses, mirrors, sound effects and editing tools organized with precision. The capital was a small but risky international investment that discovered an enormous global audience. Its business lesson is not simply that low-budget films can become profitable. Markets often underestimate talent when it does not resemble an existing category. Hollywood struggled to imagine Lee as a leading man until audiences proved that the limitation belonged to the industry, not the performer. Its psychological